We are loved by an unending love. We are loved by an unending love. We are loved by an unending love. We are loved by an unending love.
We are loved by an unending love. We are embraced by arms that can find us even when we are hidden from ourselves. We are loved by an unending love. We are touched by fingers that soothe us even when we are too proud for soothing. We are counseled by voices that guide us even when we're too embittered to hear.
And we just heard We Are Loved by an Unending Love, musical setting by composer David Sanders, based on a text by Rami Shapiro. David is a composer, musician, and professor at Montclair State University, where he teaches electronic music, sound design, audio, and video production. He's written electroacoustic scores for film, for TV, commercials, modern dance, and most recently is focused on creating musical settings for Jewish, Christian, and Islamic sacred texts. He holds a PhD from New York University. We welcome David Sanders.
Thanks. Great to be here.
It's great to have you. So tell us a little bit about We Are Loved and what inspired you from that text to create a musical setting for it.
Well, my whole reason for creating a musical creating a musical setting for a text is to really try to connect more deeply for myself with the text. So that particular prayer is from Friday Night Liturgy, Ahavat Olam, which talks a lot about God's love for the people Israel, but for humanity in general. And the rest of the text talks a lot about the people's response to that. By studying Torah and living a life of Torah. And when I saw Rabbi Shapiro's interpretation of this, We Are Loved by an Unending Love, we didn't get to hear the whole song, but the verses of the song really talk a lot about that, how supported and surrounded we all are by this creative force. But at the end, it turns around and we are all a part of that creative force, and it's actually taking responsibility for being that love, the support of a community, the support of a family, the support of any kind of group of people, and how important to that. And that to me is the big connection with the universe.
So you started writing music when? You are a professor of sound engineering and technology. And then I'm always interested in the composer who writes their first melody. Do you hear a text and all of a sudden a melody goes off in your head? Do you start writing a melody and then find a text to connect to that melody? Or what inspires you? Because we're going to hear some other cuts and other things you've written. Or is it that spiritual connection that inspires
Well, I mean, I didn't always write spiritually oriented music. I mean, when I was younger, I did the rock band commercial music thing when I was in college and later. And I gradually moved away from more commercial music and then was doing music for visual media. So when I was in grad school, I wrote a lot of music for modern dance. I really enjoyed the artistic interaction and the collaboration with a choreographer to try to create something both visual and musical. And from there, I started doing music for some television and some film, and started doing more and more audio as well for that. So doing sonically interesting things for visual material, I think really interested in me. But then after my kids were born, I really took a turn musically and I started writing things for them. And then maybe about 10 or 15 years ago, I started looking at these more sacred texts. And actually, it wasn't the Jewish ones that first popped out at me. I think they were just too close. It was actually some Christian texts and some Islamic texts that really they sparked my interest, and again I felt like I wanted to develop more of a deeper understanding and connection with them. And for me, the way to do that was to write music for them. So for sacred music that I write, I'm always working from a text. And it's a text, again, that I'm really, either I'm struggling with or it really strikes me and I want to get closer to it.
So you speak to the universality of the musical experience, that you can be, I've seen Muslims come to Jewish services, Christians, I've been to Christian services, I've not been to a mosque yet, but there seems to be something that can draw people together of different faiths and different backgrounds. Like you've written We Are Loved, you've written Instrument of Peace, May My Heart Be Open. So these are texts that a Jewish person can look at and say, that speaks to my tradition. A Muslim can look at it, a Hindu. Somebody who's not religious at all can look at a text and go, all right, I like that, makes me feel good. Right. So there's a universality in some of that?
Yeah, there's a common humanity to it all. And I mean, the texts that I typically choose are more universal sounding in the specific wording of it. So I would probably not set a Christian text that centers around the word Jesus. I am drawn to St. Francis of Assisi's writings, so I think he's unbelievably universal, in his writing. And it's always interesting to me because it's, in a lot of Christian communities, they'll point to certain prayers as St. Francis's prayers, and they're Old Testament prayers that clearly meant something to him, and he became known for preaching that prayer. So the two of my favorites are Instrument of Peace. You mentioned that before, and it's about taking responsibility for the world.
So let's talk up the next piece. We're going to hear something now that's more from the Christian tradition.
Right. Well, Instrument of Peace.
Instrument of Peace.
Lord, let me be an instrument of pardon. Lord, let me be an instrument of peace. Lord, let me be an instrument of pardon. Lord, let me be an instrument of peace.
Were you inspired, say, by John Lennon and his writing of like Imagine and that kind of idealistic vision for the world? Who are the composers that you pride yourself or are inspired by or feel are your mentors or your idols, if you will?
Wow. I mean, I was influenced by John Lennon as much as anybody living in the second half of the 20th century. I mean, I don't think my musical style is really geared toward that, but toward his style. But certainly the universality of a vision of the world and how it could be, I certainly admire and connect with that. With songs like Imagine, a tremendous amount. My musical influences are really big. I don't think it comes through in the more religious things that I write, but I was influenced. My favorite jazz pianist was Dave Brubeck. I was a big Emerson, Lake and Palmer fan. I liked classical music as well. I love folk music. So it's a very eclectic mix, and depending upon how I'm feeling at the time, I'll move more toward one or the other of those in what I'm writing, and really what I feel like the text calls for.
Now, you are a professor at Montclair State University. You work with a lot of young people. You take many of them to different countries and do study, and I think you also train young people abroad with those students. So talk a little bit about that. Does any of that came back recently from Africa? You've been to Europe many times. Does that work in exposure to those cultures, to those attitudes, to the music there, influence you as a writer and a composer? And how do those two worlds connect?
Yeah. The last 2 years, I've been traveling around with students on these reporting trips that draw more on my background in audio than music. So they're not music students; they're media students. The way it connects to me with music is that no matter where you go and no matter what the language is, music is something that connects people. We just came back from Malawi, Africa for 10 days, working in these tiny, tiny villages with no electricity and no running water up in the mountains, and they don't greet you with a handshake and this formal translated greeting.
Yeah.
The whole community came out and would sing and drum and
Wow.
dance as a greeting, you know, to guests. And it's amazing how that pulls together their community, how it centers around music, and it's amazing how we were drawn into it as total strangers within 5 seconds. And by the end of the song, we're hugging and we're friends already. And I
What
do.
was that like? That must have been extraordinary.
It's
Do you have any
extraordinary.
pictures of that?
It's
Do you have
amazing.
any
Yeah,
photos?
I was there. We brought this time. We brought a team of 6 all-female students. We were working with the World Food Program on a number of their new programs there, and typically in media, people that go out into the field and do camera work and reporting, typically it's more men, and the more production-oriented studio things women tend to gravitate for. But it was really important to us to take women on an experience like this, and we've done them before with a mixed crew, and sometimes it was all guys. But it was amazing to do this with 6 young ladies because we were schlepping equipment through mud and pushing the van
Your
when
Jewish
it got
side
stuck
just
in
came
the.
out.
Yeah, schlepping is actually a technical term. So it was an
Schlepping
amazing experience for all of us. For my colleague Steve McCarthy, who was a CBS producer for decades, it's a totally different world bringing students to places like this.
Well, I wish you'd take me. I want to go to a place like that. I mean,
maybe next
take the
time.
older people.
It's not so easy, but and the other connection with music is I do a lot of music work, and I had the good fortune of working with Peter Yarrow on a project last year. And Peter, for those of people in the audience that don't know, he's the Peter part of Peter, Paul, and Mary. Sure. He's the creator of Puff the Magic Dragon. And he's an amazing guy, and he has this organization called Operation Respect that he takes all over the world, and basically it uses music as a tool to stop bullying in schools and other places where there's a little bit of conflict and tension.
That's great.
And I was doing a program with him at the university actually, and he just stopped everybody in the room, and he said it was a crowd of maybe 100 people. And he said, take a look around at the people sitting next to you and across the room, and just tell me, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you care about these people right now? And, the typical answer was like maybe a 2 or 3, maybe a couple of 4s. And then he took out his guitar and he started singing a really simple song and asked people, well, actually, Peter doesn't ask, he insists that people sing along.
Yes.
And after 3 minutes, he just wound down the song, and then he said, okay, take a look around and tell me what your caring factor is for the people around you. And pretty much across the board, it went from 3 and 4 to 8 and 9.
Wow.
And in 3 minutes, in a room full of strangers, I mean, that's the power of music. And I've done conferences on music on troubled soil through the International Music Council, my affiliation as director of the National Music Council. And we were in Jerusalem a few years ago, and working with kids, Palestinian kids, Israeli kids, and music, it doesn't have the power to get rid of problems, but it does have, real problems.
Well, you never know.
But it does have the power to bring people together that are suspicious of each other, or are afraid of each other, or have no real understanding that we're all the same. And very quickly, it breaks down the barrier where you can actually have a conversation and recognize each other's humanity, which is the step 1 of any kind of conflict
Which is a
resolution.
perfect segue into something from the Muslim tradition, or was inspired by your Muslim interest, curiosity?
My favorite Christian writer is Saint Francis, and my favorite Islamic poet is Rumi. And he and Saint Francis lived at approximately the same
for
time.
people who are not familiar, just briefly a little bit about Rumi.
Rumi was a Sufi poet. So the Sufis are sort of the more mystical side of Islam. So he was this incredible poet, And a lot of his work has been translated into English. You know, I don't speak Persian, so I don't
Isn't it
work
Farsi?
with the
Persian?
I believe so. I don't
Yeah.
work with his poetry in
Right,
the original
right.
language. It's English translation, usually by Coleman Barks. So this piece we're about to hear is called "Return to the Root of Yourself," and it really, you know, again, it's a universal text about finding, you know, your inner truth.
And Rumi wrote that?
And Rumi wrote the
That's
lyrics.
very
So
insightful.
I get to co-write with the most amazing
Yeah,
people.
I know, that's right. It's funny seeing your name and Rumi,
And Rumi,
your
and-
name and St. Francis and so forth. And here it is. What's the name again? It's
Return to the Root of
Return
Yourself.
to the Root of Yourself.
Find the antidote in the venom. Come, return to the root of yourself. Once you get hold of selflessness, you'll be dragged from your ego and freed from many traps. Come, return to the root of yourself. You were born.
By the time people view this, you will have done a scholar-in-residence performance at my synagogue in appearance. You will have been teaching about your involvement in music and all. The wonderful thing is that your music is inclusive. It invites choirs, it invites musicians. Is that by design, or does it just kind of work out that way?
Well, I think the rub about going to a synagogue where you're a stranger and your music is not so familiar. I know that your synagogue is familiar with a number of my pieces
Yeah.
because you brought it there, but it's hard in a religious context to introduce a lot of new material because, you know, you want people to participate. I mean, it's supposed to be a participatory experience for the most part for me. So it can't all be new and still draw people in. So it's always trying to balance the balance between familiar and new. And, you know, people can have a real experience listening to a performance of music in a religious context. But ultimately, I want it to be participatory, and I want it to be inclusive. And, you know, that's the challenge. You have to keep it musically simple so that on the first listen or two, people can feel like they can sing.
Yeah.
And you need a certain amount of critical mass in the congregation to get people comfortable enough to sing. So that's where working with the choirs comes in. So, you know, we'll do a rehearsal with the choir. I'll send some of the music ahead of time. So automatically, you know, a small part of the congregation is already involved and invested musically in it, and hopefully that draws, you know, everybody else in more easily. And it helps to have good musicians to play along with and create a certain amount of energy.
I just on the spur of the moment decided I'm going to just hum a few bars of "You Shall Love," and then tell people just a little bit about that and where that's from, okay? So this is without accompaniment on the spur of the moment. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your being. Give me the rest.
I take
these words which you command to me this day. Upon my heart, upon my heart. And for the rest, you'll have to order the CD. So tell us a little bit about that text and what inspired you to write that.
Well, it's interesting you picked that one because it's the Via Hafta prayer, which is a part of every Jewish service.
Which is, and you shall love God with all your heart and with all your soul. Yeah.
And it's written, I mean, it's from the Torah, and it's written as a commandment.
Right.
And it's also one of the Christian texts attributed to St. Francis, which is an ancient Old Testament text.
Yeah, it's from Deuteronomy.
So for me, the whole reason I set that was because it's a prayer that you say, it's one of the first prayers you learn as a kid. And you say it for your whole life, and you chant it with the traditional chant. And at some point in my life, I was feeling like, well, I'm doing this, but I'm not feeling particularly connected with it. And I started to look at it and go, why don't I feel a connection with this anymore? And part of it is that, you know, it's all the traditional text, it's all written in commandment form. You should do this, you shall do this, you shall do this. And I myself have an aversion to being told what to do. So there was a little rub that way, and I was feeling like I needed to personalize it. So where you broke and forgot the lyric, it's not coincidental where that's where it happened, because that's where it changes from my interpretation of it, from a commandment to actually accepting the commandment. I take these words which you command to me this day on my heart. So for me, connecting with it meant turning it around to not the commandment, but me accepting the singer or the sayer of it, accepting the commandment and saying, yes, this is what I want to do to consecrate myself to you. So it was a very personal way, and it was a very personal setting of connecting with that prayer. And about a year after I wrote it, and I got a call, and it was thanks to you, actually, from a synagogue, that they wanted a setting for choir for the prayer. And for me, it went against the whole nature of the setting because it's so personal, and to write it out in harmony for a choir, it just went against it. So the musical solution for me was to write a Hebrew sort of a cappella accompaniment for it in Hebrew, and then that goes underneath this, you know, a solo singer singing the English text. So it was an interesting musical problem, and I was happy with the solution.
In the few minutes we have left, the one thing that I do is teach a class on spirituality, and the opening mantra of the class was, let's distinguish between religion and spirituality. Both are important, both are connected, but in some sense you can't have a full expression of religion without spirituality. So what does that word mean to you? It's bandied around a lot. What does it mean to you?
I mean, spirituality to me is really connecting with, you know, the universe, with common humanity, with my fellow man,
with the divine,
and God through that. I mean, I think it's a package. It's a package deal with, you know, the world around you, humanity, and God. And I don't think you need an organized religion to do that. And you know, at different points in my life, I've had an aversion to organized religion. My kids have an aversion to organized religion at this point in their lives, and they always said, "If I'm not interested in this, why should I do it?" You know, when they were growing up, and my response was, I think if you have absolutely no religious background, regardless of what it is, when you're growing up, that you always feel a little bit of a stranger in a religious community. And if you grow up around it, even if you're rejecting it at the time, it's in your bones, it's in your blood somewhere. And if you want that connection later on in your life, I think it's easier to make it. And for me, the connection is always through music. You know, I know I'm guaranteed walking into High Holy Day services that at some point I'm going to cry. Probably my one time during the year, and it's really the visceral response to the music. Some of it is from my childhood, and some of it is new because the synagogues I attend, they use a lot of new musical settings too.
Were you surprised when someone like Matisyahu sort of shaved off the beard, trying to redefine himself or reshape himself for a more secular success, when religious-oriented musicians sort of try to go mainstream? Have you ever thought of that, writing more pop, cultural? We're going to break soon for your closing melody, but have you ever thought about that, writing more commercial?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I started out writing that, and you know, I got married and had kids very early on. I was in my mid-20s, and I quickly decided that, you know, making a living as a composer or a performer, it just didn't jibe with what my idea of family life was going to be. So I made a real turn toward, you know, production and teaching, and it worked out very well for me. And when I came back to doing music more after my kids were grown a little bit, I wanted it came out of my kind of spiritual interest. So for me, I mean, I think it can go either way, and clearly, I mean, he's got a name now, he's got some notoriety. Why not? I mean, I would do the same thing. Why not reach for a bigger market? And if you're true to the music that you're doing, which I think he is, then sure. It's a living, Mom.
Yeah, right, I know. You've got to make a living. As a great playwright once said, you can make a living in the theater, but not a killing. Talk a little bit about our closing melody, which is going to be May My Heart Be Open. That seems to be the quintessential text that you wrote something for, asking people to be open to what you have to receive, what religion, what spirituality, what different faiths. May my heart be open. Talk about that for a few minutes,
It's actually, I think it's probably the first Jewish text I set, because I think I'd done a Sufi text and a Christian text before I turned toward Jewish ones. You know, the text is from the Slichot service, which is the official opening day of the High Holy Day season before Rosh Hashanah.
Yep.
And it's really a prayer about, you know, help me to be open to this whole time and to people and to my community and to my family and to myself and to God. And you know, it's the chorus of it, may my heart be open to every broken soul, to every orphan life, to every stumbler walking unknown. I mean, that's very specific. And then the verses are a little bit more abstract and artsy, which I kind of liked as well. So,
okay, well, we're going to listen to that in just a moment. And I want to thank Phyllis and Althea and Karen. If you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with us, if anybody can, how can they order your CD? Is there any way, can they go on MySpace? You want to give everybody the MySpace link?
Well, actually, I think the easiest thing is emailing me at Montclair State University. It's SandersD, SANDERSD, at montclair.edu, MONTCLAIR.edu.
And I'm Cantor Mark Perman, FEJC, Emek, Shalom, and Simsbury. This is the Interfaith Roundtable, which people are forced to listen to every month. No, they're not forced to. They enjoy watching every month. And if you have any questions for me or thoughts about future shows, you can send me an email at mjperman9@gmail.com. That's mjperman9@gmail.com. Thank you so much for joining us here on SCTV. And thank you, David. Thanks for being my guest and my friend. And we'll see you next time.
And may my heart be open to every broken soul, to every orphan life, to every stumbler walking unknown and groping in the shadow. May my heart be open. Bless these eyes, purify them to see man's beauty rise in the Word, and the glory of my people in its redeemed land, spreading forth its fragrance over the may my heart be open to every broken soul.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.